Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hello.
This is where we take the sources you've shared with us and, well, we dig in together to get informed fast.
Hmm.
Today, our mission is to explore one specific article you sent over. It analyzes a very public moment involving Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron.
Right, and this piece really offers a strong perspective, doesn't it?
Mm.
It looks at what happened, the explanation given,
Hmm.
and then delves into what the author thinks might really be going on underneath. Uses some interesting comparisons, too.
Exactly. We're focusing squarely on this author's analysis, the one from the source you gave us. It's less about just reporting the event itself.
And more about how this particular writer interprets it,
Yeah.
the reactions. It's all through their specific lens.
Got it. So let's set the scene first. The incident that sparked this whole analysis, as described in the source anyway.
Okay, so according to the article, we have Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron in Vietnam. They're on their plane, just about to leave it.
Right, on the steps.
Seems like it. We're just inside. And the source says Brigitte raises both her hands and pushes Emmanuel sharply away from her.
Sharply away. And this wasn't subtle.
Apparently not. Says it was in full sight of cabin crew. And crucially, it was caught on camera. Video.
Okay. Very public, very visible. A physical gesture. So naturally there was an explanation offered. What did Macron say, according to the source?
Well, his stated interpretation was pretty straightforward. He said they were just joking around.
Joking around.
Yeah, and that it's something he does quite often with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
That was the official line reported in the piece.
Joking around. But the author of this piece, they're not really buying that, are they?
No, not at all. Deeply skeptical. And this is really the core of their argument, the jumping off point.
What's the main point they're making?
The author feels there's something fundamentally, profoundly, viscerally troubling about any kind of angry gesture directed towards a person's face.
Any angry gesture near the face. Why the face specifically?
Because, as the author puts it, the face is nakedly vulnerable. It's exposed, instinctively something we protect.
Okay.
And the author tries to reinforce this feeling, this strong reaction to anything near the face by bringing up a memory.
From their childhood.
Yes, apparently.
Yeah.
Recalling that even back in the 1970s, a time the author notes was perhaps less, politically correct, their mother felt that striking a child anywhere near the face was seen as the worst form of bullying and humiliation one person can inflict on another. Really strong words.
Wow, okay. So drawing on that historical perspective, the author sees a real disconnect.
Exactly. A sharp contrast between that deeply felt sense of vulnerability around the face and what they perceive as this current willingness to just brush off shovegate, as they call it.
To just frame it as, what was the phrase? Harmless marital horseplay.
Precisely. The author sees a real inconsistency in how this specific act seems to be getting treated, at least in some quarters.
And to drive that point home, to really highlight this perceived inconsistency, the author makes a comparison, a pretty significant one.
Yeah, they bring up that incident from 2013 involving Charles Saatchi and Nigella Lawson.
I remember that. The photos were everywhere.
Right. The article mentions the photos specifically showing Saatchi with his hand around Nigella Lawson's throat. And it notes she looked visibly distressed, maybe even on the brink of tears.
And that incident wasn't downplayed, was it?
Not at all. According to the author, it was widely viewed as serious. It led to their divorce. It wasn't dismissed as trivial or playful.
So the author's asking a direct question here implicitly. Why the difference? Why was the Saatchi-Lawson incident treated so seriously?
While this physical act, the shove involving the Macrons, is potentially being waved away as just a joke. That's the core contrast they're drawing.
Okay, so that leads the author to wonder why. Why might this incident be downplayed? They must offer some theories in the source.
They do. It's speculative, of course, but they explore a few possibilities for this difference in reaction.
And what's the main theory the author leans towards?
Well, the primary suggestion, and it's quite provocative, is that the key difference might be that the Macron incident involves what the author terms woman-on-man anger.
Woman-on-man anger. Interesting. How does the author think that dynamic changes things?
The speculation is that it could tie into lingering laws of machismo.
Machismo, meaning?
Meaning perhaps an underlying societal expectation, maybe a holdover from the past, that men are supposed to just take it, to brush off such actions from a woman.
Like it shouldn't really affect them, or admitting it does would be unmanly.
That seems to be the implication the author is exploring. that maybe these things aren't supposed to wound their soul, as the author puts it, in the same way they might if the roles were reversed. They also throw out another idea, that perhaps downplaying it serves a purpose related to public image. The author speculates it might make Macron look less statesmanlike if people thought his petite wife was in the habit of pushing him around. Again, pure speculation on how gender roles and public perception might intersect.
Okay, so gender dynamics, machismo, public image. Now, the author doesn't stop there, right? The source connects this incident back to the Macron's relationship history itself.
Yes, that's another layer the author adds to the analysis.
Yeah.
They argue that this incident, and the way it's discussed, inevitably shines a spotlight back onto how their relationship started.
The age gap, specifically.
And the context. Teacher, former pupil. The 25-year age gap. Meeting when he was just 15. The source brings all that up.
Does the author have a stance on age gaps generally?
They actually make a point of saying they're usually relaxed about age gap relationships. They even mention their own parent's father, 27 years older than their mother.
Okay, so it's not the age gap, per se.
Not just that. But they follow up immediately, arguing it's, quote, unworldly to ignore potential power imbalances in this specific kind of situation.
Teacher-student dynamic, you mean?
Yes, suggesting that women can be as predatory as men when pursuing much younger partners, especially within a school environment.
That's a strong claim.
It is. And the author goes further, positing that sometimes in these dynamics, the older female partner might exert an alarming level of control.
Alarming control. Do they offer any basis for that?
They mention anecdotally knowing 2 midlife men who they claim suffered abuse from older female partners. And then they speculate.
Speculate what?
That maybe exerting that kind of alarming level of control could sometimes be the whole point of the pursuit in the first place for the older partner in such relationships. It's definitely a challenging perspective presented in the source material you shared with us.
Right. And it's crucial we remember, and the source does state this clearly, that this line of argument, linking the shove to the relationship history and power dynamics, it's presented as speculation.
Absolutely. The author is very clear on that. Uses the word speculation, admits they might be wide of the mark.
They didn't suggest any other, maybe simpler explanations.
Well, the author briefly mentions, but dismisses, other ideas, like could it be some specific French marital custom we don't know about, or even hot foreplay.
Hot foreplay, okay.
Yeah, but the author doesn't seem to give those much weight, quickly returning to the main argument.
Which brings them back to that core comparison.
Exactly. Back to Saatchi and Lawson.
Yeah.
The final point hammered home is basically, if light strangulation was not fun for Nigella,
Then why, in the author's view?
is a shoved face a joke for the French president? That's a question left hanging.
So, summing up this deep dive into the article you provided, it really unpacks one author's specific take. Starts with that public push.
Questions the joking around explanation.
Draws that stark comparison to the Saatchi Lawson case to suggest maybe a double standard in how we react.
And then speculates about deeper reasons, gender roles, machismo, even potential power dynamics rooted in the specific history of their relationship.
It really shows how a single event can be viewed through such a specific analytical lens by one particular author, doesn't it? Focusing on vulnerability, control, gender bias.
Definitely. It's one interpretation based on sources they were looking at and their own framework for understanding these things in public life.
And exploring this analysis, the one you brought to us, really underscores how complex interpretation can be, especially with public figures. Gender, power, the context, personal histories, societal norms, they all feed into how an event is seen and judged.
It certainly prompts you, the listener, to think about the lens this author uses, and maybe it makes you reflect on your own reactions. How do our backgrounds, our assumptions about relationships and gender shape how we instinctively judge these kinds of public physical interactions, especially when power figures are involved?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought to leave with. How do we decide what's a joke, what's serious, and why? Definitely something to mull over from this deep dive into the source you shared.